This is Tim Winders, your host. This is where we redefine success in leadership, business, and ministry. And one of the things we just love to do is share great stories, great guests, great conversations. And that is what we're going to be doing today. I'll get to the introduction of our guest and we will begin that conversation shortly. But before I do, I just like to make a request, especially if you're a first time listener, or if you've been listening to a few, but you haven't connected with us outside of either the podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, or even on one of our social channels. We would love to have continual dialogue with you, or at least to continue the conversation. And there's a few ways to do that. You could do that on all of our socials. You could find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on Twitter. We're Seek Go Create at all of those places. But what we'd love for you to do is to jump to seekgocreate.com. That's our web presence. You'll find detailed notes, detailed descriptions of all of our episodes and resources that guests mention. All of those you could find there. We have a page per episode. You can also listen into the podcast there. But what I'd love for you to do is typically at the top of the page, there's a bar that says, give us your email address and we'll stay connected. So give us your best email address so that you can stay in contact with us. We'd appreciate that greatly. And we won't blow up your inbox, but we will keep you updated on all the cool things that are happening at Seek Go Create. So today our guest is Aurora Winter, and she combines, I love this statement, the best of Silicon Valley and the best of Hollywood. I'm excited about having those conversations. She's a best-selling author, TV producer, media coach, ghostwriter, and successful serial entrepreneur. She uses her filmmaking expertise in neuroscience to help people communicate and get results, whether it's raising seven figures for a startup, negotiating for a raise, or enrolling a new client. If you have ever wanted to write a book, become an in-demand speaker, or communicate more effectively, you'll definitely want to stay tuned to this episode. Aurora, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
It's so great to be on the show with you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I gave you a little bit of warning, but my first question is I just like to kind of read the bio, but then I like to say, Aurora, we bump into each other. What do you do? If someone says, what do you do? What do you tell them?
Well, I help people turn their words into wealth, wonder, and wisdom. I think so many people have at their disposal their breath, their words. And yet, so often when people ask an ordinary, everyday question like the one you just asked me, Tim, what do you do? The answer is, because they haven't thought about it. They haven't rehearsed it. They haven't composed it. So I love to help people solve that problem. And it can show up like a book, video series, a podcast, YouTube, or like raising venture capital or writing a TV movie or feature film.
Yeah, now that's pretty broad. That's a wide net, and we're going to get into a lot of those in just a moment. But you mentioned a word that I don't think I saw. Maybe I did because I've read your most recent book. We'll talk about that later on. And I looked at a number of the things that you do, but you use the word, and I take notes when I'm interviewing here. You use the word wonder. You use wealth, wonder, and wisdom, which I
Yeah.
love all of those words. But I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone that has inserted the word wonder into a description of themselves. Tell me more about that word.
Well, I love the word wonder. And really, we want to, some of the time, we want to evoke wonder. So if you are a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and you've got a brand new widget that does something awesome, you're not necessarily immediately looking for the sale, but you want to show people like, wow, look at this. It can do this whole new thing, like Steve Jobs with the first Apple launches that he did. It was like wonder was involved. And I love helping people who are writing movies or who are writing children's books. And so we are evoking wonder. Now, sometimes that wonder can also eventually turn into wealth, but the first goal could be wonder. And, anybody who's listening to this who has not listened to Tim's first episode, I just finished listening to it. It's amazing. And it evoked wonder and awe because you were so real, you were so raw, you were so authentic. Your voice quavered even at several points because you were telling the whole truth and it was a little bit challenging. And that evoked wonder and respect in me. So I think, turn your words into wealth doesn't really fully capture who I am and what I would love to contribute to the world. So turn your words into wonder, wisdom, and wealth more or less captures it. It's a good trifecta.
Well, I love it for a couple reasons. Number one, I think they're all very descriptive. And just like you just mentioned with that word wonder, it especially someone like me, I'm wanting to ask questions about each one of them. And I think in many ways, that's the way we would love to engage with people is to just, ask me more. I want to say enough. And if, because truthfully, I'll just be a little bit blunt here. If you were to say that to someone that you help people use words to invoke wealth, wonder, and wisdom, and they kind of go, meh, whatever, that's probably not someone you're going to really want to interact with, not to, push people off, but wouldn't you agree? I mean, you probably get a ton of questions from that, right?
Well, I love questions and I love what you're saying. And I think another mistake that entrepreneurs often make is we don't want to attract everyone. So if somebody hears, Aurora is somebody who loves helping others turn their words into wonder, wisdom, and wealth, and they're not interested, great. Good that we've gotten that clear very efficiently, right? They're not my people. Doesn't mean that
Right.
others couldn't serve them, but I'm not the right author for them to read or the right coach for them or the right person to help them with their book. So good to know. So I think also that is another aspect of communicating effectively. We want to both attract and repel. Like you and I are both like faith is a big part of our being and what matters to
Mhm.
us, not that our beliefs have to be everybody else's beliefs, but if somebody is like a diehard atheist, they're probably not going to resonate with me as much as others. So fine, good for them to get help somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And so, I'm sitting here and I'm wanting to get off this word wonder because I've got so many other things to ask. But I'm just sitting about, I'm thinking about culture. I'm thinking about society. I'm thinking about all that's going on in the world, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of those things. And I'm wondering, notice how I inserted it there. I'm wondering if we could just all use a little bit more wonder to, to, to just inject that. So anyway, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. One of the things that the pandemic helped me realize, I was going to say confronted me with, but helped me discover, because I was at that time living in Silicon Valley, is that our society in North America has got an obsession with money, and money has value. Money is the definition of value in some ways, but a rich life has multiple aspects, and wonder is one of them. So I recently started rereading C.S. Lewis's The Narnia series, which starts with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And that evoked such delightful wonder in me when I was 9 years old and read it. But as an adult, it also still evokes wonder. And that's a delightful aspect that I think many of us are living two-dimensional lives if we don't have any wonder.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'll move off of that and go to something else that was just very intriguing to me when I was doing some study on you and just reading your information. And it was say it says something to the effect of you take the best of Silicon Valley and Hollywood and kind of bring those together. We have on the show here, we've interviewed some Silicon Valley veterans. We've got like probably 3, 4 at least that I could think of top of my mind, people that would be Silicon Valley types. And then we've got some that have been in the entertainment industry. I know one in specific that's coming to my mind from Hollywood, but never have run across anyone that has said they bring those two together. What is that like? And tell me about the best of both of those worlds.
Oh, such a great question. Yes, one foot in each camp. I am one of those weird people that is a hybrid. And
Mm.
that's where the value lies in that surprising connection. So, what I think is the best of Silicon Valley is that engineering smarts, the analytical smarts, the technological smarts, super geeks who invent the next widget and can change the world, like as we've seen with major tech companies like Apple and Amazon and Facebook and et cetera, taking over the world. But what the failing is often they cannot communicate what the heck their thing does and why we should care. And so, when I was in Silicon Valley, lots of times I would meet with people and once they spent a half an hour explaining what it was. Okay, now I get it. But that's way too long, right? Most pitch meetings don't even last that long. And that was just to understand why this thing should even matter. So that is the blind spot of those really smart engineers who can change the world. And then I have a lot of experience in Hollywood. I used to be a head of development for Canada's largest film and television production company. I've produced and written films and have a big background there. So what's great about Hollywood is razzmatazz. Showtime. It's the twinkle, it's the glow. It's like, ta-da, catch your attention. But sometimes there's no substance. So combining those two, the really smart eggheads with the, hey, let's get your attention and communicate clearly in a nanosecond. That's what I love to provide.
Well, the cool thing about that, and I think you obviously did a great job of describing it, is that they both have a cool, hip, I don't know if sexy with Silicon Valley would be the right word, but let's just go to Middle America, or I'm originally from the South. We look at those two areas and we kind of look at them in a little bit of awe because Silicon Valley has done so much over the last, 30, 40 years. Going back to, most people don't know the origin, it was chips and things related to silicon. Now it's just, apps and stuff like that, high tech. And then Hollywood's always been just Hollywood. And so bringing all that together, I guess a big question I have, I kind of love origin stories and how people come to be who they are. And we're gonna get into a lot of book items. And I think I shared right before we turned on the microphone. Oh, by the way, I just finished writing a book. And you went, what? So we're gonna have fun discussing some things. But tell me how Aurora, and we'll maybe do the Reader's Digest, the short version, but how did one gain experience in worlds that many times they're total separate? No one crosses those boundaries. Talk about where over the course of your life you kind of noticed you were just crossing all kinds of boundaries. All the time.
Weird that way. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been doing business. My first business sold for 6 figures when I was in my 20s. Went on to launch 3 other businesses who were all successful in different industries. So I have this very strong entrepreneurial, it can be done, let's do it. But then I've also been a writer since I was 9. And I first, was inspired by C.S. Lewis and the Narnia series. I'm like, I'm going to write. Of course, my first books were mostly coloring of horses and unicorns. But so I've always loved writing and I've always loved entrepreneurship. And I've always been in awe or in wonder of people who have breakthrough ideas, whether they express them in a book, like I want to hear more about your new book, or whether they express them in something new. And when you hear about something new, it's like, oh, I should have thought of that, like Post-it notes. We should have thought of that. But the person who thought of it, it's like they blessed the world, right? Or Time Traveler's Wife. When I first got that idea, I'm like, oh, that's such a great idea. I should have thought of that. Combining 2 things, right?
So when let's go back, like, young, were you that way as a child? Was there something in your environment growing up that fed that? The reason is that I've kind of always felt a little bit of that. People always will tell me, we hear this all the time. You've got to get a niche. You got to know who your audience is. And truthfully, I'm a generalist. I love multiple topics, multiple things. And I'm not in any way saying that that's good or bad. It's just the way it is. But at some point you had to recognize that you had a lot of interest and maybe, and if I'm putting words into your mouth, you say, no, Tim, that's not correct, that you could possibly get bored if you did the same thing for like 10 years solid in a row. Yes or no?
Yes, that's definitely
Okay. All right, good. So
and
we're on the same page.
Businesses.
Yeah.
But I don't think I started businesses initially from, oh, I better not get bored. My first business, I took honors economics. So that's the business side of me. I was madly in love, young newlywed. Okay. So we both had executive jobs. That sucked. No time to spend with each other. And nobody was going to implement all my great ideas because they take like forever. And I want things done yesterday. So we started a business, So I was working as an analyst for a market feasibility company, actually studying where to put real estate. You would know that from your background, right? So studying, population growth and where should you put shopping centers and where do you want to put the townhouses and the single family. So I had all of those analytical skills. So did a market feasibility study on what business can we start with no money. So we started a
Mm.
yacht charter business because my husband was a sailor. I was not a sailor. The first time I went sailing, I took a dinghy sailing course and then made the mistake of watching Jaws before the final exam. Needless to say, that was not good. But anyway, it was the only business that we could think of that we could start with no money. And kind of the rest is history. The first sailboat show that we went to, the old timers who were running successful charter companies or boat rental companies were like, those kids, they're not going to be back next year. We can see they are eating rice and beans. But that company grew from nothing to the largest yacht dealership in Western Canada. So we also started selling boats. And so it's just kind of like every time I saw something and then we implemented it. So we started selling boats because I noticed that at that time you could get a lot of tax benefits from real estate if you owned real estate and you rented it out. In Canada
Mhm.
at that time, there were some really great benefits. 33 and a third straight line depreciation, 7% investment tax credit. Anyway, bottom line, made it a good deal. And so I asked the $1 million question. I wonder if we can do that with boats. And after spending $20,000 with the lawyers and accountants, the answer was yes. And so we started a yacht sales company, but we did it differently by also providing, hey, you can charter your boat with our charter company. And hey, we'll set up the paperwork for you so that, this $100,000 boat really only costs you $30,000 after tax savings. So because I have a restless mind, I'm always thinking, how can I add more value? And that ends up oftentimes creating a 7-figure business because, well, anybody could have copied that idea. Nobody did. So we were the only people in Western Canada, or maybe Canada, but anyway, the only people in Western Canada offering to sell a boat with tax benefits. And that's kind of the story of my life. Then later, I started a film and television production company with a partner in London, England, and I was living in Los Angeles. And so I'm like, well, how can we add more value? So again, it was like, well, one person in England, one person in Hollywood, one person in Toronto to have Canadian content. And all of a sudden we could access pools of extra money and extra government benefits, and voila, more value provided, and therefore
Yeah.
a
So it's
successful startup.
so a few things I've gotten 4 things just off what you just said that we may or may not have time to get into, but one of the things that you just said is intriguing to me. I heard in at least both of those situations, something that I think many people would miss, and that is there is a level of detail that someone has to have to say, "We're going to look at how tax benefits can impact what we're doing," or that we're going to look at structuring a multinational film and production company. We're going to see where the incentives and benefits are. Is there some accounting or tax? I mean, where did that come from? That's a level of Aurora. That's a level of detail that some people are listening. They're going, "What? I don't even consider those things. I actually do more than I should, unfortunately." But where did that come from? I mean, where's that level of detail? Are you a numbers
Well,
person?
it's true that some people might be glazing over. So I want to emphasize that just ask the question, how can I add more value?
Mm.
If you ask the question, how can you add more value? Different things will appear. And then you won't necessarily be competing head to head, whether it's at a job or whether you own a business. And I do also want to share that part of why I'm so passionate about helping entrepreneurs with their message is because what I just said a few minutes ago, which was the honest answer to your question, is really not the best answer in terms of
Oh,
sales. Like when I, in all excitement, just like I did with you a second ago, Tim, explained 33 and a third straight line depreciation, 7% investment tax credit, people who wanted to buy boats were like, what is she talking about?
yeah.
I like her. She's clearly excited about it, but what does this have to do with me?
Mm.
So that is $1 million idea. But the difference between $1 million idea and $1 million message is the $1 million message that finally launched that company and got the phone ringing off the hook was 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter.
Hmm.
So when we put that on ads or on the radio with a beautiful picture of people having fun on a sailboat, they're like, what? 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter. I still don't quite understand, but it sounds interesting. Let's call. And yeah, kind of went
Well,
there.
you're tying things together because when you originally said it, you got the depreciation, you got this, it was just like, huh, I don't think that's what they put on the billboard or the marketing materials. Now, I think you put it deep down in there, and when someone asks, hey, what's the deal with this tax shelter thing? You've got it. But I appreciate you clarifying that because, and I actually think that there was a story about that in the book I just read that you brought up. So I appreciate you clarifying that because some people would be sitting here, especially if they're that type person, and they'd be going, that's what I need to do to let people know. But that's not why people buy boats. I mean, listen, I've owned a boat, and I'm the living example of it being like the second best day, first best day, whatever. It's like the day you get it and the day you sell it, because listen, the boat I had, we were just putting money in it and things like that. So, I mean, boats are an interesting thing. You just have to really enjoy them. And so I love that y'all were able to tie in that tax
Well,
thing,
see,
but
that's very interesting. Like it took me a while to realize, oh, people just want to buy the boat. And all of these things that took me so long to cook up are just an excuse, a
mm,
rationalization, or,
yeah,
a way to present it to their wife or their banker. But that's fine. It's another way of adding more value. So, for example, now I help people. Some of the times I help people, publish their book, and I'm still restlessly always asking, how can I add more value? So I looked at how it's normally done and I saw a bunch of problems and I've solved them, or many of them. And yes, there are tax benefits if you're in Canada, but never mind that. The way that books are typically done, a journalist or a writer such as myself would interview an expert such as you, and we'd get your story, we'd ask you a bunch of questions, and then that would be transcribed, and then it would be put into a book, and then be shown to the the person whose story it is several times, have them check it, and then after a long time proofreading, editing, polishing, book layout design. You've just gone through this probably, Tim. Then you end up with a book,
oh yeah,
maybe 2 years later. But then people have to talk about their book. They have to go on podcasts, and get on radio, get on TV. So most of the time people make their book and then they go, oh shit, I need media. I better get on podcasts. I need media training. And then they do that. So the whole process
right.
takes like 5 years. So I thought, well, why don't we just compress all of that? And I will interview you on podcasts that will give you media training as I am discovering your story. And then you get a book, you get the podcast, you get the media training, and it's all done, in a fraction of the time. And it's a lot more fun. And people are writing through this process 8,000 words an hour. Well, that's
Yeah,
unheard of. They've even a fairly decent writer cannot usually crank out 8,000 words in a
sure.
day, let alone an hour.
Right.
So it's not always about tax savings, although if there are tax savings, let's
Yeah,
find them.
yeah, yeah.
It's also about seeing what are the things that are just done normally, and maybe that's not the best way.
Yeah, and we'll move along from the tax savings. I promise no more questions related to that.
Thanks,
But
Tim. Your listeners, thank you.
yeah, you mentioned earlier. Well, I've got a question, and this is I don't even this is probably a good time to ask it, but I just feel as if you've done so many things in the business world and continue to interact with people to help them tell their best story, to tell their brand, to get their message out to the marketplace. And I don't think this is controversial, but we're in a world that division seems to be everywhere. And there's just so much division between, let's just call it color and male, female, and wealthy and not wealthy and things like that. I just feel like I should ask you, uh, from a female perspective, what have you seen that might be challenges that maybe Tim hasn't seen? And we're not looking to air out a lot of things here or whatever, but I mean, I'd just love to hear from your heart.
Mm.
And then what have you seen that might just be, you know what, it just is what it is, and I've dealt with it. I guess just maybe the real question is, can you talk about the female perspective in all that you've done in some form or fashion? Because I know we've got a lot of listeners that are females, and at times I know that we're in an unlevel playing field. So could you just address that in whatever way you want to? I'm going to allow you to do it however you would like to.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to give you what I initially thought and where I am today. So
Perfect.
as a young woman, I thought, oh, this thing about male, female, like, no, there's no difference. It's a level playing field. I don't want to ever put on the victim hat and play that card. And surely, if I just show up, that things will be,
Mhm.
equal. And I didn't want to reinforce. I still don't want to reinforce any ideas of
Yeah.
less than. And my mother would always be talking about the patriarchy and how things are not even for women. And I'm like, Mom, come on, get with the program. Now I'm older and I realize, you know what? It's true. Um, Sometimes women are not heard, and even just the timbre of our voice. I have a fairly low voice for a woman, but sometimes people just don't hear a person who is a woman, or hear a higher voice. I'm really passionate about helping people be heard. And part of that is about communicating effectively and understanding the neuroscience of communication. And that applies equally to men and women. On the other hand, I think that
Mm.
it is true women are not heard as much, but women are better listeners. So we have that advantage, generally speaking. All generalizations are false, but generally speaking.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the neuroscience that we mentioned in the introduction, because that was I think that is a piece of it. And you brought up something, and my wife and I've had long conversations about it. We went to a church at one point that they had males and females that were preaching there, and I think that's a good thing. I'm all for that. I know some people that's controversial, but whatever, they can live with it. But there was also a female that preached that I don't know how to say it any other way, that she really yelled a lot. Okay. This was a Pentecostal, we were kind of one of those churches. And my wife would kind of nudge me at times. She goes, "You're not paying attention." I said, "I'm sorry. I'm just kind of checking out." She goes, and she would kind of get on to me and she goes, "Do you have a problem with," because men would do it, it wouldn't bother me as much. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it's because my mother yelled at me when I was growing. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I find it fascinating. And I've had to really look at myself and say, okay, is there some people that I tune out because of something? And you
And
know
what
what I
do you
really,
think? Do
I,
you?
I,
Do you
I
think?
think, I think I might. And you know what? I think we may all do that to some extent.
Mhm.
And unless we ask the question, we won't be able to really break down those barriers. What do you think?
Well, I think women are used to having long conversations with their girlfriends. And that's
Mm,
lovely when you're talking with your girlfriends, but it can lead to too many words, too verbose. And so get to the point. So the neuroscience of communication, it breaks it into 3 steps. And when a
yeah.
woman is communicating to a man unaware of the neuroscience, she may be talking to discover what she wants to say. And that's fine if it's your husband or your son. But if you're speaking to a congregation or you're speaking at a leadership, at your work, uh, do that before so that you know what it is that you
Yeah.
want to say. So women oftentimes we're still discovering what we want to say, and that is a burden for the listener. But if you know what you want to say, then you need to filter it through just 3 steps of the neuroscience. And as you read in my book, Turn Words into Wealth, many smart people like Silicon Valley people, they send an Excel spreadsheet or the verbal equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet to another smart person, thinking, okay, well, they will just download that verbal equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet. And that's not how communication works. So,
Mm,
you need to first understand getting the attention is first. So that our ancient croc brain is like the crocodile that's in the moat of the castle, and you're trotting up on your horse. You've got an important message for the king and queen, yeah, but you can't give it to the king and queen. You've got to get past the moat and the crocodile. So what does that look like? That looks like 5 seconds of what's the point? What's in it for me? That looks like 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter. That looks like turn your words into wealth. Okay, we got the point. Or, in your case, it looks like redefine success, right? Snappy. There's a value. Oh, I want to hear about redefining success. So I'm listening. Okay, that's step one. Caught the attention with value for the listener. So then the step two, the drawbridge comes down and you're on your horse and you trot in. Well, you still can't give your message to the king and queen. They're not standing waiting by the drawbridge. What's inside the moat is the social brain, or this, the knights, and you have to pass the social sniff test next. And that is asking question like, what is the status of this person? Who sent them? Who else has done business with them? So for example, my clients who become authors, all of a sudden they've got more authority. Or my new book, Turn Words to Wealth, just won Best Business Book of 2021 by the Los Angeles Book Festival. And it also got the Literary Titan Award. So these things are like, oh, okay, Literary Titan thinks she's okay. Los Angeles Book Festival says she's okay. Tim is interviewing her. Maybe we'll listen a bit to Aurora, even though she talks about tax shelters. Okay, so that's the social thing. It's like, where are you in a status, setting? And then if you're lucky, you get led into the inner chamber and you get to deliver your message to the king and queen. This is where your question about male, female also comes to play. So just as if you were in the Game of Thrones, you want to address both the king and queen, otherwise off with their head. And that means varying the story component with the statistics component. Don't give all numbers. Don't give all statistics. Don't give all stories. See if you can braid those things together and provide both of them. And then again, be aware, if you give the 5-second answer and then people want more, then you probably have permission to go on for 30 seconds. And then if they ask more, then maybe you have permission to go on for 2 minutes. And even if you've got 20 minutes of content to give it in little chunks, hopefully like you're seeing with me with Tim, except for the answer about tax shelters earlier, where you're all excited. So he's asking me more questions, and that is a clue that the person wants more. And where people glaze over when men and women talk is like, you're making the person do too much work. What is the point? Especially men are wondering this a lot of times, when women are just trying to discover what it is that they feel or think, or women, and men jump in to answer and solve the problem, but women are still not certain. What is the point? What is the point of the story? You have to know what is the point of the story. Does that make sense, Tim?
No, it makes total sense. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm not really even sure where the question came from, but I love the answer. So, because what it was is it enabled us to highlight the importance of, I don't want to say the process, but I think what so many of us do, especially in a high stress, high, uh, you know, highly divisive world, we communicate like we want to be communicated with,
Mm-hmm.
without any thought or recognition of who we're communicating to or whatever. So I love the 3 steps that you went over. I was taking notes here myself. And I think that's going to bring value. Yeah, I love the word here. It's going to bring value to the person listening. And
Yeah.
I've got one more, I guess I'll call it a general question before I want to begin going into why everyone, leaders, entrepreneurs need to have a book. But it's kind of something that we started discussing before we even hit record, and you've brought it up a few other times, but we love to talk about success here on Seek Go Create, and we really like to talk about how we have either made the decision to, or we've been forced to redefine success. Can you think of some examples in your life that you could share where you either have made the decision to redefine what success looked like, what it meant, or external catalytic events, something forced you to shift that paradigm?
Well, I've had both the catalytic events and the more recent events. I'll share the pandemic because that may be more uh, relatable for the listeners today or the audience today. You know, I have been in the habit of hosting like 3 or 4 events per year. My last event was February 2020 in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. It was a midlife reboot. It was awesome. It was fantastic. And I'd planned to do a Phoenix Rising writers retreat next, and coach training retreat. And of course, I had to cancel all of those events, as everybody else who's in the event business. So then I asked myself, and everybody can be well served by asking themselves these 3 simple questions, especially when you're pivoting. What am I really good at? In other words, what have you spent over 10,000 hours doing? What have you got some level of mastery? So what am I really good at? And then filter that by, what do I love to do? So I'm really good at tax shelters, but I don't love to do them anymore. But I love coaching and helping people. So, you know, important to focus on what fills you with joy and energy. And then the third question is, who is that worth the most to? So when I needed to pivot my business because of the pandemic, I thought, okay, well, what am I really good at? Writing, coaching, publishing, storytelling, a lot of experience in film, television, and writing. I've written 6 books, a whole bunch of screenplays. Um, who's that worth the most to? Well, it's worth the most to people who are raising capital, or people who want to write books or leave a legacy. And, you know, so I filtered through that, and I tweaked my business to allow more one-on-one VIP coaching, and have a whole process for somebody who would just like me to see them all the way through creating and publishing and promoting their book. And I'm super happy, and it's working great. So that's a recent example.
Right.
Um,
One
and
quick
that
one
was
quick one quick question on that. And this is one of these questions that it really isn't an answer, but I think it helps us to reflect.
Mhm.
If there had not been a pandemic or some type of an event that shut the world down, and going back to February 2020, which is not that long ago, actually, what do you think you would be doing today had that event not occurred? Have you put any thought into that at all?
Well, I was in the process of on the cusp of raising capital for this business idea that I had, which is related to what I'm doing now, except I'm doing it the VIP hands-on way rather than the Silicon Valley, let's automate this and turn it into an app way.
Mm,
So that opportunity is still there. But I'm not living in Silicon Valley right now. I chose to move back to Canada, where my family is in British Columbia. And who knows what the future holds, right? You also
yeah.
asked, when did I make a choice that was cataclysmic? So, as you know from reading my book, Turn Words into Wealth, Tim, my husband died suddenly when he was 33 and our son was 4. And so I went from, you know, being rather cozy as a wife and business partner, and having a young child, and starting a fledgling screenwriting business, because I always wanted to be a writer, and I was writing, and I was actually at that time being paid to write my very first screenplay for money, which became the TV movie Eli's Lesson. And then my husband died. So, okay, all of a sudden I have no husband, I have no best friend, I have no yacht business with him that I can run. I don't even know how to sail, barely. And so I needed to shift. And what happened, through the grace of God, really, because it was like so many coincidences, as I got invited to pitch the movie I was writing at the Banff Film and Television Festival, now the Banff Media Festival. And so I practiced and worked on my 20-minute or less pitch for the movie I was writing. And that was a televised pitch. So I spoke to about 600 film and television producers from Hollywood and from around the world, including Canada. It went really well, and it ended up in a bidding war, and my agent was fielding offers on my behalf. And that 20 minutes changed the trajectory of my life. So, you know, it led to 6 figures. It led to a cool career in film and television. Before I had my own business, I was well paid to work in the industry for Atlantis Films and Porchlight Entertainment. And that's part of why I wrote Turn Words into Wealth. I think We spend so much time perfecting our products or services or working on, I don't know, Google ads or Facebook ads, but we don't really consider that good luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. And I had put a lot of effort into preparing, but the time that I was, on camera was only 20 minutes, but it changed everything. And so that I like to help others, do that. Now, I did not really choose that proactively from I could see how I need to change my life. I was like friggin' desperate. I would do whatever opportunity came my way. And I had no clue that it would work out. But it later was turned into a documentary called The Big Break, and it aired on national TV. And it was used to teach the art of pitching in the Banff Film and Television training program. So I guess it was not a bad pitch.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember reading that what a significant event that was, and also it's interesting to me how that, I guess, developed from something that would have been a very negative, traumatic situation, losing your spouse, and we ask the questions. We don't ever know the answer to these. Is would we have been propelled into that situation? The preparedness, being ready for it, even the mental aspect of it, if it weren't for some of the tragic events. Not that we embrace those tragic events, but it is interesting. And that's probably where faith and other things come in, that we could go down that path, but we're not going to, because I want to kind of use that to bring us back to the question that I think you're going to be able to bring a lot of value to the person listening and me also. And that is, why would someone want to have a book? And I think you make the statement, I think you present the position that every expert entrepreneur and leader needs a book. Why? Tell us why that is, and then we'll get into some of the details of the book as we begin. We've got a ways to go, but as we begin to wrap up here.
Okay. Well, what is the definition of a leader? Right? A leader is somebody who has something to say, who has something to share, who has something to provide to their followers or their people in their company or their people on their team. So most people will be saying over and over the answers to the frequently asked questions. They'll be over and over sharing from their heart. And if you can put it in a fixed form, like you shared from your heart in the first episode, please, listeners, go back, listen to his origin story. It's very moving, but it's captured in a fixed form. And so you do it once and, thousands of people, millions of people can listen to it. Having a book is even better than that. A podcast is kind of like a newspaper or a magazine. It is good. It's in a fixed form, but it's kind of like, what's the recent podcast? We want Tim's podcast from today, not from yesterday. But a book is something that is more like a seed, and it's part of your legacy asset. So every entrepreneur and leader would benefit from a book for two purposes. One, to share their message one to many and leverage their time much more effectively. And two, to change the framing of the conversation. So they're not just seen as another entrepreneur with another widget or another da 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 da. They are, oh, you are the expert with the book. You've written a book. The root word of author is authority. And so it doesn't take, like my clients who are dentists, I help them write their book, Keys to a Healthy Smile After 40. Their business went from 1.5 to $6 million, partly because of their book and getting clear on their message and doing the right book that attracted the right client for them. So that's the benefit of the MBA with the writing, because before writing their book, I'm like, tell me more about your business. Who's your ideal client? And they were attracting business the same way most dentists do, with free checkups. Well, that just brings a bunch of people, but maybe that person will spend $200 instead of $5,000 or $10,000 as somebody over 40. So Keys to a Healthy Smile After 40 brought them their ideal client and positioned them as the go-to experts for people who wanted help with their teeth over 40. There's many other reasons to write a book. You learn so much, and we haven't even talked about your new book, Coach. I'd love to hear what your feeling is about that. But I think even the process of writing it is so valuable because you get more clear. What was your experience?
Well, just like you were saying, and that was going to be my follow-up question, is that there is a very introspective, reflective, learn a lot about yourself. I mean, I physically wrote. I did not go through the efficient process that I know you discuss and teach and work with people on. These two fingers is my joke. They typed out all 70,000 words. And except it was like type, 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 backspace, backspace, type, 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 back. So, but I do think that I know I learned about. In fact, there are times that I wonder if the book was more about Tim learning more about himself than all the people that may read it. And I'm excited about that. But I guess give a perspective, and you give a lot of examples in the book, and I'm going to recommend people get that and read through it of people that have used this process. But give your perspective of the value of writing for the person that is the author writer or the person involved with the process. What all do they really gain? And let's take it, let's don't really look at the $1 million to $2 million business. All that's great. I love all that. But you kind of know the way we define success a little bit here. A lot of it is internal. What are some of the internal things you've seen people go through in this process?
Well, it's really interesting. I can give an example from myself and also from a client of mine. So one of my clients, Xander Sprague, we're working on his book, which is titled Epic Begins with One Step Forward. Well, when we started working together with the interview, podcasts like episodes that then turn into chapters, he didn't have a title. He didn't know really what his book was about. He kind of sort of knew. But in the process, like the quality of the content can depend on the quality of listening. So as I'm really listening to him, pulling it out, it's like, I don't know, the divine energy flows or consciousness flows, or there's an on switch, whatever way you'd like to think of it. And he was full of ideas. He came up with the title, Epic Begins with One Step Forward. And then he's like always texting me, what about this? What about that? And so there's an aliveness around the creative process, especially for people who don't like doing the typing that you did. If somebody is listening, for myself, I write lots of different ways, including the typing, although I can use all 10 fingers. And I find that what happens when I'm actively writing something, like as I was writing Turn Words into Wealth, and then I'm listening to a podcast, I'm like, oh, I need to put that in. Like Joe Rogan said, that's got to go in. And so then it makes your whole life alive and more like the lights are on, because you're always listening for, how does this relate to my topic? How could I add more value in my book? Oh, maybe I could slide that little bit, in there. And I don't know, I just feel like I'm alive when I'm writing. For me, when I'm in the flow of writing, I don't feel like I'm writing. I don't feel like I've got the book. I feel like the book's got me, like it's flowing through me. It needs to be born kind of energy. And so I can, it's not thinking it up. It could go as fast as I can type, or as fast as I can dictate.
Yeah.
So there's so much value. And on another level, on a non-business level, like my first book, From Heartbreak to Happiness, is my diary of healing after my husband died. And that, I just decided to publish it because it was, when I stumbled across it years after he died, I was like, whoa, that was a ride. And I wanted to give that gift to other people. Because when you're living through something horrendous, like you went through bankruptcy, you were so honest about that. Well, going through the death of my husband was like, should I just shoot myself now and get this over with? But reading my diary, I mean, when I flipped it open years after and read it for the first time, it took me 2 hours to read it, but it spanned like more than a decade. And so you could get the sense of the forest for the trees. And as I edited the diary that I had written in the aftermath of his death, so much shifted in me. I healed so much, and I had a whole different perspective, because I realized I many times prayed for something, and then 3 months later I would receive it, by which time I'd forgotten that I'd prayed for it. But when I edited my diary, I shifted to realizing from thinking that God hated me and had, sent
Mm.
this to me as a punishment for something I had done wrong, to, oh, actually, I do live in a supportive universe. And the things that I prayed for did come true. And I just felt a whole different sense by looking at the forest rather than looking at the trees, which you probably experienced with your bankruptcy, which you shared so honestly about.
Right. And the thing that's, I guess, so beautiful about a book like you just mentioned is that there is a lot of therapy involved for you writing it, like you just mentioned. But then there's also therapy and healing for someone who may have gone through something. I don't even know if similar matters, that, but they're just going through something. And to know that there are other people out there that have moved through that, been healed, that doesn't mean there's not scars there. There are scars there. We can't eliminate some of the scars from those things, but you know what? There's life after those scars. And so I think it's beautiful. That's one of the things that I have noticed about myself in this process is that it has been somewhat therapeutic because I would not have considered myself a writer. I talk, I flip on the mic, I get up on a stage and I talk, or I man of action, business. And so, but you know what? I really do think that the Lord wanted me to slow down and
Mm.
capture some of these things. And I believe that's what happens with a lot of people that you interact with. They need to get a story out. And I love that you help facilitate and help people do that because you and I know, I don't know what the percentages are, maybe you do, of the people that say they have a story in them that never get it out. Do you know, I mean, do we
Yeah.
know those numbers at all?
Well, the number that I do know is 80% of people say they would like to write a book. Most first time authors take on average 3.5 years and then oftentimes never publish the book. So I love everybody to appreciate the value of their authentic story. The things that you've
Mhm.
lived through, your expertise and your life experience can be valuable to others. I mean, my mother died recently, and as you know from reading my book, Turn Words into Wealth, Tim, when she passed, I was grateful for two things. I was grateful that I was there when she took her last breath, because she was there when I took my first, and that felt right. And I was also grateful that I had interviewed her several times, several months before she died. And we've got about 8 hours. I can turn that into a book. But even before turning it into a book, I shared it with family. And those stories, the details of her growing up in the pioneer in Alberta and the details of her life won't be lost, even though she told me the stories many times, that not
Right.
listening thing that kids do, or just, fading the specifics. So I'm really grateful that I've got that. So there's also that legacy aspect, the things that we take for granted that we know so well, other people's don't. And they may be praying for your message, for your story,
Yeah.
for your book.
That's really cool. You know, we interviewed, I can't even remember when it released, but Mitzi Purdue, who's from two families of legacy going back to the Sheraton hotel chain and Purdue. She would married to Frank Purdue, and she said that on one of her sides of the family, that part of the legacy that's required is that before people turn 60, they have to write their autobiography, and it
Mm.
goes into whether it's published or not, but the actual writing of it, they actually keep a library. That's the family library that everyone prior to hitting 60 has to write there. I said, that is phenomenal. You would love that, wouldn't you?
I would totally love that. Yeah, I totally love
Yeah.
that. And I love books. Like, I've been mentored by so many people who are no longer alive, like
Mhm.
Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's one of my mentors. C.S. Lewis is one of my mentors. Wayne Dyer, actually, I met him. He endorsed my first published book and gave me a big hug. He's passed on now. Like, one of my mentors.
Oh,
That's the value of a book. A book is like telepathy that can
yeah.
travel over time.
So a lot of people, I'm just probably in some people's heads, they've got this. Yeah, but a book would be for, and you actually give some good examples of this in your book also, that it would really be for celebrities or people that are already in a position of they've got followers, they're influencers, but you make a pretty good case, I think, on both sides of it. I mean, if you've got some influence, use it. But how would you respond if someone says, I don't really have a lot of influence. I wouldn't be considered a celebrity. I'm not sure that I should consider writing a book, anything. I don't think it would go
Well,
over
there's
very well.
multiple ways I could respond to that, but I
Go
feel like
ahead.
the deepest answer is, who are you to dismiss who you are? And who are you to let your ego be dictating what you create? Like, creation is big word for me. My three go-tos are create, connect, and contribute. So we have the create book word in common. And what is creation? Well, I feel like we're little droplets of water in the ocean of God, or unified field, or the universe, whatever word works best for you. So do your little job as your little droplet of water, your little
Mhm.
droplet of divinity, your little droplet of creation. And maybe book is not what you create, but don't not create it from the, oh, who am I and who would listen to me, because somebody needs your message. When I published my first book, I really thought it would only help other young widows who had young children whose husbands died suddenly right in front of them. And that
Mm.
book helped change the lives of people who had lost pets, who were on their own deathbed, who were
Mm.
fired from their job. I had no idea. I didn't know. The emotional journey that I went through was similar to the emotional journey that they were going through. And it reassured them, hey, Aurora managed to get through it. Maybe I can too. So who are you to dismiss and discount what you have to offer before you even offer it?
Yeah, that's I love that deep answer, because we could have kind of glazed over the surface. Oh, you just need to write a book, you need to do it. But I love that everyone's got a message, and there's someone that needs to hear that message.
Yeah.
And that's what I keep reminding myself. I mean, we do what we do with podcasts and things like that. And sometimes we do it and we're not sure who all is out there. I mean, we've got metrics and we know that good things are going on, but it is
Well, you're
this.
going to give a little tease about what Coach is about, your book Coach, that's coming out
I
sometime
will.
soon.
I actually just recorded an episode yesterday where I read a few excerpts and talked about it. It is not a biography, but it's in the genre of Greatest Salesman in the World, the Ogmandino books. And it's what I call fiction with purpose, or fiction with a mission, where there's story, there's fiction, but there are some learning points and teaching points. And so anyway, thank you for asking. And maybe you and I can talk offline about that some, because I think that would be fascinating for you and I to discuss. But yeah, it's been a fascinating process. But the reason I asked what I just asked is because I have noticed I would definitely, prior to a lot of the things that went on with us financially from '08 to 2013, I would have been considered probably not just confident, but I would have probably been pegging the arrogant scale, that I thought that, if I ever do this or say this or whatever, everyone wants to listen, everyone wants to buy the book, whatever. That's changed quite a bit. I believe that I've been humbled, but I still have pretty decent amount of confidence in what I do. But I could tell you that the writing process and reading through it, there have been mental battles that have gone on going, I can't picture someone like Aurora reading this and looking and going, yeah, this is pretty good. She would probably read it and go, I don't know. And so, but that's a battle. And I'm sure in the position you're in, you help people work through that probably, don't you?
I help people work through that, and I help them make their book better also
Uh,
with editing and with polishing and making sure that it's got a solid structure.
yeah.
So, you've done over 100 podcasts now. I bet this podcast is better than your second podcast. Your first podcast was amazing because
Yeah.
you're coming from the heart. It's a skill, like any skill, you get better
Mhm.
as you go. So there, the primary mistake most people make is they don't have a structure that will hold their words, and that needs to be resolved. But then also to take the time with polishing and editing and
Mm.
Not sure where the question was. I've forgotten what your question was.
Well, the mental part of it. I mean, because one of the
Yeah.
things I noticed, I mean, I was getting words on paper or words on digital, but there were times I was like, going, wow, do I really want to keep doing it?
Oh,
One of
let
the
me
things,
talk about the mental part. Sorry.
well, one thing about it I want to say, and maybe this is a piece of it, is that I really love the speed of your process
Mm.
because I think speed can eliminate some of those demons from messing with your head. But I think you're about to say something else. So you could address speed or whatever you want to on that part.
Well, speaking of speed, yeah. So when I work with my clients, we spend quite a while getting the structure right, making sure
Mhm.
that what they want to say, what the theme is, that it's going to achieve their goals, and we structure out the story quite a bit. But
Mhm.
then we know what we're going to cover in any one of these, mock podcast episodes, and then they get 8,000 words per hour, and then it's transcribed, and then we've got the messy first draft. So that's really fast, and that really helps because then they're not wondering what they're going to say. I mean, like in this conversation, you can't really spend much time thinking about what you're going to say. You just respond to the question, and it's super fast, and that keeps an aliveness to it. Whereas overwriting can happen otherwise when you're working by yourself, perhaps, and you keep fussing with the same sentence until you beat all the life out of it. But what I want to say about mindset, everybody has moments where they think, I should just tear this whole thing up. I am the worst writer on the planet. I can't believe anybody would read this. I don't even want to read it. In fact, a story about that is Stephen King, back before he was like the famous Stephen King, while he was still writing and he was getting published in, little sci-fi journals. He wrote 4 pages of an outline and then he crumpled it up and he threw it away. He thought, that is the worst. I can't even believe that I wrote that. Shit. Fortunately, his wife pulled it out of the garbage can and smoothed the crumpled paper and read it. And she said, I think you have something here. You should probably carry on with that. And he's like, really? No, she said, yeah, you should carry on with that. So at this time he had a full-time job and so did his wife, but they were barely eking it out. They were, I think, living in a much more modest trailer than you are in, a beautiful one there. And he was working at some horrible job with blue collar job, like cleaning up oil or something horrible. But anyway, he wrote it and his agent was always calling him with rejections. So, and this is back in the day with the corded phone. So his agent calls, says, are you sitting down? He's like, yes, but the chair wasn't close enough. So then the agent said, okay, I have an offer for that book that you wrote. He's like, okay. He's like, are you sitting down? Yes. And he said $600,000 and it was Carrie. And he just like slumped to the ground. He fell to the ground. That was more money than he could ever imagine. Like $60,000 would have been life-changing to him at that point. And every writer is like that. If you're having a bad day, you'll probably, dump a bunch of stuff that's really good. If you're having a good day, then you think stuff that's maybe not so good is good. Like you cannot judge your own writing. So just be the channel, get it down, and don't start rewriting and editing. Just be the channel, get your first draft down before you start chopping up what you've got. And speed does help because the other problem first-time authors have is they're not clear on their story. So one day they're writing this story over here, and that's a fine story. And then 2 weeks later, after they pick it up again, they're writing more this story, going in a different direction. Either of those directions were fine, but half of one and half of another leads to a hodgepodge. So how does that resonate with your own experience writing
Yeah,
your book?
no, it really does because I've taken time to do it. There are times I've picked up and it's just flowed, and then times I'm like going, "What are we doing here? Where am I at in the story? Who are the characters? I don't even know what I'm." So yeah, that's a great point there. A couple things as we wrap up here because I know we're watching our time. What all right, let's just say we're gonna recommend people get your book, and we're gonna mention how they can do that in just a moment, or how they may even be able to work with you personally. But let's just say someone's listening in, and let's just say we have planted a seed that they are thinking to themselves, "Hmm, I've kind of thought about a book, but I've never thought about it this much." Aurora, what would you recommend they do next? And again, we're going to tell them to get the book and possibly work with you, but just what would be like a good thing for someone who they might just be getting a little bit of a stirring? about
Okay, well, they
writing a
take
book?
my 90-day challenge, which I mentioned in the book, but they don't have to read the book even to get the challenge. I'll tell them
Okay,
quickly. So
perfect.
it's a 90 days challenge is to write every day, read every day, and then reflect once a week. So writing every
Nice.
day could be as little as 5 minutes. Get out your journal and just mind dump. What are you thinking about? What's going on? And just do that, choose that practice for 90 days. And then read every day. And again, it could be as little as 5 minutes. You could read Coach, you could read Og Manduna, you could read my book. Not a newspaper. Read something, inspiring, hopefully. Read the Bible if you like. Read good, something good that's going to inspire you and not work related. And then once a week, perhaps on Sunday, reflect. So scan what you wrote, scan your notes if you made them from what you read, and just notice if you keep complaining about something, maybe you should do something about it. Or if something's alive in you, then maybe you want to write a little bit more about that next week. And just choose this as a practice. I promise if you do this for 90 days, you will come out a different person and you will be much more in connection with yourself and what matters to you. And out of that, you will have clarity if you do want to write a book or you want to start a podcast, you want to start a business, you want to leave your husband, you'll have a lot more clarity. I'm joking about that, but you need to talk to yourself. We need to have relationships with ourselves first. And journaling is a really great way to do that.
Sure. Yeah, that's I love that, and I know for those that are listening to this, I'm sure that our notes will be outlining that challenge. So that's a great challenge for everyone.
Yeah.
Aurora, where can people get in touch with you now? At the time we're recording this, I believe that the book has just released. We're in early May. People might be listening in via YouTube or the podcast later in the summer. So, where can people get in touch with you? Where do you want them to go if they say, I need to contact or connect with Aurora?
If they'd like to connect with me, two best avenues. One is my website, aurorawinter.com, and you'll find out all about me there. Aurora Winter, like the season, unlike your name, which
Yes.
sounds the same, but it's not the same, .com. And then LinkedIn is great. LinkedIn.com/in/Aurora Winter will reach me. And of course, you can get my book wherever books are sold, on Amazon, on Kobo, on Apple. So Turn Words into Wealth, I think is a good place to start if you're interested in writing or interested in communicating more effectively and more powerfully. Or you can just listen to this podcast again and then do the 90-day challenge. Read, write, review.
I did read the book in the last few days. I'll tell you, it was excellent. I enjoyed all the, I guess, the technique type items, but I think I really enjoyed, and maybe it's from where I'm at right now. I enjoyed all of the stories, all of the examples, I guess, that you gave of what books have done for, I would say, regular people, celebrities, and all. You really put together a lot of stories in there that if someone were to read it, it would be very difficult for them to say, "Nah, I don't want to write a book." I mean, you
Yeah.
really, and that was intentional, I'm sure.
Thanks, Tim. There are lots of great stories. I think most people have no idea how authors actually make money. And the book Turn Words into Wealth shows you a bunch of different success models and gives examples from David Goggins to Tim Ferriss to my clients,
Yeah.
how they have used a book to take their business to the next level.
I did.
Yeah.
I love the chapter where you go through the different business models. I'm kind of a business model junkie myself, going way back, and I'm sitting here reading it, and I'm on my iPad, so I'm kind of highlighting, going, "Ooh, I kind of like that," and I'm looking at that, and also, anyway, excellent job, Aurora. Thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure we include links down in the notes or in any of the platforms that we're including the podcast or the video on. Aurora, I gave you a warning for this, and you sort of gave us clues as we went through this. But seek, go create is who we are. And I like to ask my final question, one of those words, you could choose one over the other two right now, currently. Which one of those words means more to you right now than the other two?
No question, create. I
And
think that's where
why?
we add the most value. And in every way, we're creators as business entrepreneurs, as leaders, as authors, as podcasters and YouTubers, as you are. So create. I think
Eh,
everybody can create something new and I love creating. Yeah.
Excellent. I love that. Thank you so much, Aurora. I appreciate you sharing with us. One of the things that I know I'm going to take away from this is how you started with that word wonder. And a few times throughout the episode, you mentioned something about a restless mind or restless mindset. And I'm going, that's what wonder is. And I just love how that kind of came out. That'll be my theme for this episode. And if you've been listening in, I know that you've gained value. I appreciate you listening. I know Aurora appreciates you listening. I recommend you go get her book and the resources that she has. And we would love for you to continue the conversation, like I said at the beginning, on all of our socials, on our website. You can comment, you could ask questions. I'll even pull Aurora back in if there's something that you have that you'd like to ask her. But definitely take this episode and share it. That's my big ask, is that you share it with people. You can do it on your social. You can take a picture of the podcast art and share it, but just share it. We appreciate you doing that. That is how people find out about podcast. Everybody says that's the number one way that people listen. So please share it. And until next time, we have new episodes every Monday. Until next time, continue being all that you were created to be.